John was enjoying a welcome mid-morning break when he was the victim of a vicious street crime. It cost him several £1,000s, but it wasn't until the next day he realized the enormity of it. All he can recall is responding to a text from what he thought was his bank, urgently asking him to verify his security details. Moments later, he'd been robbed in broad daylight.
You can't see cybercrime, but there are ways to avoid it. At Barclays, we'll never ask you to verify your security details by text.
When police enter the home, Jonathan is still chained up. And just prior to the police entering the home, Louise had one of the older daughters run into the bedroom and unchain Jalissa and Joanna and throw the chains in the closet. They had been chained up since October. So going on 90 days, and they get unchained as the police are entering the house. The chains were wrapped around their wrists like bracelets and then around the bedposts. The police noted that the kids were all dirty and smelled horrible and determined that they had not changed clothes in 7 months. The parents could give no logical reason as to why the kids were chained. Both Jen and I have a law enforcement background, as we've said before on this program, and I couldn't imagine being the responding officers to this. This is one of those things where it takes everything that the responding officer has not to lose their patience and temper. Could you imagine standing in this house talking to her and her not being able to provide there is no justification.
There's never a logical reason to chain up a child.
But for her to just stand there and be like, well, I don't know. I mean, they're chained up and everything. I mean, the officers certainly should be commended on their self-control.
Yeah, and I think people need to realize police officers have human reactions too. And the one thing, no matter how long an officer has a career, the things that you remember are things involving children. And you know, y'all have heard me talk about it before. That's where my heart is. You do something to a child, an elderly person, or a disabled person, I mean, it's all over for me. I mean, it's just, that is the hardest thing for me to accept.
And Louise told police that she was confused as to why they were even in their home. Obviously, David and Louisa are going to be arrested, and they need to be. They were arrested on 9 counts of torture, 10 counts of child endangerment, and held on a bond of $9 million each, which, to me, the 9 counts of torture and 10 counts of child endangerment, boy, that's really, it's hard to encapsulate these children's entire lives into those 19 counts, things that happen to them every day.
Well, and they can only charge them for the crimes that occurred in that jurisdiction, too.
Sure. So when police led them out of the home in handcuffs, David was crying uncontrollably, but Louise was acting strange and emotionless, and even was smirking at the officers, according to them. The adult siblings were taken to one hospital and the children to another, and that makes sense because you have different medical facilities that specialize in adults versus kids. These children had to be put in their own wings of the hospital with 24-hour guards. They had gone through so much that the police were taking no chances, and they were going to make sure that they were safe.
I'm going to get into talking about the results of the exams once all these, I keep calling them kids, even though the majority of them are adults, but once all these kids are at the hospital, and it's hard to hear, but the reason we do the podcast that we do is because we need to remember these victims. And hearing this not only is going to make you remember the victims, but it's also going to put that notion in your head. If you see something, say something. Here's the results. They said all but the toddler were 20 to 50 pounds underweight. The adult siblings had cachexia, which is the wasting away of the muscles and loss of muscle tone. Jennifer was 29, and Jessica, who was 24, would probably never be able to have children. So 29-year-old Jennifer was 5'3" and 80 pounds. She had low cognition, inability to perform mental tasks, malnutrition, acute B12 deficiency, tingling, weakness, and numbness in the hands and feet from peripheral neuropathy. Joshua, he was 5'8", 115 pounds. He had severe iron and vitamin D deficiency. Now, Jessica, Joy, and Juliana were severely underweight and had the malnutrition, cachexia, and vitamin deficiency. Jonathan, the 22-year-old, remember, he was usually one of the suspects, but at 22, he has these same things as his sisters with the underweight, malnutrition, cachexia, and vitamin deficiency. But he also had skeletal abnormalities caused by years of restraints from the ropes and chains. He was 5'7" and 100 pounds, which was 47 pounds below weight. Janetta, surprisingly, was not underweight, but she had slow cognition, neuropathy, severe protein caloric malnutrition, severe iron and vitamin D deficiency. Jordan, James, and Jalissa were the worst of the younger ones. Now, you know, when we take our babies, any mother knows you want to know what percentile your kid is. Like, my kid's in the 50th percentile. So I'm going to give you those percentiles. So Jalissa, the 11-year-old, her body weight percentile was 0.01. And normal would be between 5 on the low end and 85 on the high end. But she was 0.01. Her height was 0.79. So these are way below where they should be. Jalissa's mid-upper arm circumference was the same as a 4-month-old. She was anemic. She had severe muscle wasting, low potassium and glucose levels. Her heart was damaged, and because of the extreme malnutrition, her liver was also damaged. She had psychosocial dwarfism, which is basically stunted growth due to factors other than genetic. James, who was 15, his weight, 0.01 percentile. Height, 1.4 percentile. His muscles were so weak, he had an abnormal gait and difficulty walking. He had a vitamin D deficiency, visible scoliosis where his back was even in an S shape. And he also exhibited antisocial behavior. He had told the doctor he wanted to kill animals, and he believed his dreams could predict the future. Now, Jordan, our 17-year-old who called 911, she was just over 94 pounds. She had a protein calorie malnutrition, muscle wasting, mild scoliosis, and as we could hear, she was very childlike for her age. And she needed speech therapy as she was somewhat difficult to understand. Jolinda, the 13-year-old, had severe malnutrition and muscle wasting. Her weight was in the 0.04 percentile and her height 0.01 percentile. Just to give you an understanding, with her weight being 0.04, which is a little bit more than the other siblings, she's 13, but her weight is that of a 7-year-old. She was very small, and she showed no normal signs of puberty for a girl of her age, such as breast development.
For those of us who aren't moms and don't really understand the percentile thing, basically what you're saying is that 99.96% of the population her age weighed more than she did.
That's correct. Joanna, who was 11, her weight was again 0.01 percentile. Her height was 0.81 percentile. Vitamin D deficiency, potassium deficiency. They said after 10 days in the hospital, this 11-year-old put on almost 8 pounds after 10 days, which a child her age would normally put on 8 pounds in a year.
Sure, they're probably been able to eat for the first time, really.
And Jana, the 2-year-old, she was the best fed, but her weight was 7.5 percentile, and her height, 7.18 percentile. So she's still at the very, very low end. So she's 2 years old. She weighs 25.5 pounds. And they said over the next 3 months, she gained 3 pounds. The doctors also said that they would have to slowly start feeding them because they had gone in this state of malnutrition for so long. If they just start feeding them normal, they would have some problems for that.
Would probably gorge themselves like nonstop, you would think.
Oh, they would probably binge eat.
Yeah.
Yeah. The doctor said they had long-term psychological and psychiatric issues, that they all most likely suffered PTSD. None of the adult siblings looked like adults, and they even had to be bought children-size clothing. The doctor said they would need lots of long-term and probably lifetime support for any chance at even a halfway normal life.
It's amazing just hearing all those numbers and statistics. It's amazing that they all survived. Really, I can't believe that of the 13 that none of them passed away.
Well, I will tell you, in the investigation, the police did bring cadaver dogs in the home to search for signs that one of the children could have died. And they even did that at the home in Texas, brought cadaver dogs there because, I mean, you would think that all these children on the verge of death, that somebody had died along the way.
Well, sure. And as amazing as it is that they all survived, all that does for me really is just make me ready to see these people go to jail, honestly. The police began the investigation by conducting a neighborhood canvass, and we've talked about how secretive they were, and people on the street that they lived on couldn't provide much information. Neighbors said that they saw 1 or 2 kids at a time and that the kids were not friendly and seemed to avoid contact with the neighbors. No one suspected that there was 13 kids living in the home. In fact, when questioned by police, the neighbors estimated that there were no more than 3 kids living there. One neighbor stated that she saw a boy digging in the neighbor's trash, but didn't know what to make of it. I don't know. She must not have realized that he may have been looking for food, or who knows. When they did see the kids outside, the mom would stand there watching them, just kind of lording over them. 2 neighbors talked about how white and pale the kids were and how they only came out at night. And they joked that they were like the Cullen family, the vampire family from the Twilight movies. Every one of the neighbors recognized that this was a strange family, but it never occurred to them that people were being abused in the way that they were.
So let's talk some more about the police investigation. I already told you about the cadaver dogs they brought to search for possible human remains. But when they searched the home, they found some odd things. Like there were hundreds of DVDs stacked to the ceiling in the garage, and they were alphabetized. And they included every season of Kate+8, Disney cartoons, and horror movies. There were numerous unopened toys and gifts in the garage for kids. Now, the kids would be shown these gifts and these toys, but they were not allowed to touch them. And again, this is psychological torture for kids. Louise had thousands of items of clothing for herself, and a lot of them still had the tags on them. Now, the teenagers we know had 1 item of clothing each, plus 1 set of pajamas. They also found where Louise had kept a list of who had lost good treatment at Christmas, and some had lost Christmas until 2021, and we're talking 2018 when they found the list. And the media quickly dubbed this house as the House of Horrors, and I think that is very fitting.
Now, David and Louise's